Hello there, and welcome to the EDC Empire. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Mantis Knives Gearhead, designed by Hawk Designs, the people behind the Deadlock and Shortcut, if you don't recognize Hawk Designs, and produced in China. Before we get into the kind of details and technical measurements of this knife, I just want to talk about this trigger mechanism. That's just what I'm going to call it. I don't know. I don't think there's a more appropriate name. It's really, really interesting. The Gearhead is using a liner lock or locking via a liner lock. And this thing is just really, really interesting. And if you clicked on this video because you want to know, is it actually utilitarian? No. This thing is entirely overpriced. You should have been able to figure that out by the blade material being 440C and the cheapest version being $180. If you cannot figure that out, well, I have to assume that either you do not care about blade steel or you are new to the hobby, which if you are, welcome. But is it any good besides the awful blade steel for the price? Well, let's get into it. It is running on bearings. Like I said, it has 440C as the main steel, and if you get this cool Damascus, it is 440C with a 440C core of 62 layers. Pretty cool. It is, I believe this is hollow ground, and you can either have carbon fiber or aluminum handles, and I'm just going to recommend, if you like this and you want to get it, which more power to you, get the aluminum version, and we'll get into why later, but just trust me, get the aluminum version. Unless you love the look of this carbon fiber, you're going to be disappointed, in my opinion. We'll get into that a little bit later on. We have an overall length of 6.98 inches when open and 4.15 inches when closed. We have an overall depth when folded of, 0.12 inches and a width at the pivot of 0.57, which means when compared to your PM2, you're going to definitely be quite a bit thicker. But overall, carrying wise, this thing has been, or it's pretty easy. You've got a pocket clip, which functions quite well, and it's not overly long, it's not overly wide. Really, it's just overly kind of thick. But that's honestly the dimension that I care about the least. So, cool. Getting into some size comparisons, we have the PM2 and the Para 3, and what we can see here is that it is definitely a pretty small knife. And then getting into two more, we've got the Benchmade Bug Out and Delica 4 here, and again, you can see it's going to be smaller than both of these pretty average-sized folding pocket knives. And then, finally, we've got the QSP Penguin and Civivi Elementum, and what we can see here is that it's actually quite comparable to the size of the Penguin, and it's just slightly smaller than the Elementum. We have a blade length of 2.833 inches and an edge length of 2.77 inches, which means if you have a 3-inch blade restriction, this is going to fall well within it. You have a blade stock of 0.11 inches, which means that combined with the hollow ground blade, you actually have a pretty nice BTE, and overall it's a very usable overall profile. And then finally, keeping in mind that this is the carbon fiber version, which will probably be a little bit lighter than the aluminum, but I can't imagine that much more or that much less. We have 3.64 ounces. So first off, why do I recommend the aluminum version over this carbon fiber version? Well, if we were just looking at this side, I would say carbon fiber all the way. This is the $240 version, the creme de la creme of gearheads, with carbon fiber layer 1, carbon fiber layer 2, and then a third piece of carbon fiber acting as the basis for these smaller gears to operate the big gear. And that means that it looks really cool. From this point of view, I have no complaints. But I do have complaints when you flip it over and you just see what can only be described as a crappy texture or checkerboard. We could play checkers or chess on the other side of this knife, and not in a cool way like this, in a very boring and crappy way. And it's not really coming out, or yeah, it's coming out pretty well if I don't hit the glare. It looks like crap. I don't know why for an extra $40 they couldn't have just put another piece of carbon fiber on here, make me spend $10 more. I don't care. This looks crappy. And the aluminum version, they just have another aluminum plate. I don't know why they chose to have this here, but it completely detracts from this knife, in my opinion. I despise it. The clip works really, really well. This is a complaint that I have very frequently, is that clips don't work very well. This one works well. It's pretty comfortable. It is just a painted black clip, which I would have liked to see something on this side. If they refuse to have nothing other than a checkerboard, I would have liked to see some sort of pizzazz over here. I mean, this is pizzazzed out. This is just a boring checkerboard knife. But yeah. Advanced Knife Bro did a review of this, which I thought was extremely good, and I agreed with him a lot of points, but he did say that he hadn't heard of Mantis Knives, which I have also never heard of Mantis Knives before this, and that they felt pretty similar in quality to Kershaw. And I would say that's a little bit unfair, but not completely. I would say it's a little bit better in some respects, but in some, I'm kind of disappointed. If you don't kind of force this thing out, I've actually had a few times where the lock bar doesn't fully engage, and it has different amounts that it wants to engage by, and I honestly would like to see a little bit more lockup than what that is right there. Let's see if we can get a full deployment. Yeah, that's what I would slightly prefer to see, and it's a little bit inconsistent about how much it wants to lock up, which is a little bit unfortunate. I also think that everything else is done pretty well. The edge is decently consistent on both sides, so I think it's a little bit better than Kershaw, but I would say, I don't know, maybe it is definitely comparable to some of the best I've seen from Kershaw. So I wouldn't say it's Kershaw in a bad way, but I wouldn't say it's well above Kershaw either. I will say that the design choice to have an open face, but also have a liner lock, is an interesting one that I dislike a lot. Even for just light tasks, with how easy it is to decompress this bar, I mean, you could do this with your, like, you could literally just do this with, like, the side of your hand. I've just disengaged it. And I've got to say, I don't like that. I can definitely see this being just like a gents carry, boom, cool. But combined with the trigger mechanism not really allowing you to do a discrete opening, which is kind of what you want in those circumstances, along with it not really having a very good method of actually locking, or, I mean, the method of locking with the liner lock is fine, but the liner lock doesn't really have anything to protect it. It's a little bit disappointing. I also just noticed this, is this internal? Yeah, it has internal stops right here. So I was going to complain that it doesn't have stops. It does. So an important aspect. But yeah, I want to like this, but also, this thing took forever to break in. And honestly, I don't even think it is fully broken in yet. And that's a little bit disappointing, honestly. Like, it still kind of sucks to deploy, and it sucked a lot more. I basically had to do this, basically wheel it out and completely ignore the cool functionality of this knife for a while. It was quite stiff, even after I oiled it up. And honestly, I don't know where I should be oiling. Should I be oiling these gears? I think a little bit, but there's also bearings. There's 2 bearings in here. So I'm kind of I don't know. I like the idea of this. I think the execution in a few different levels is a little bit poor. I would have liked to see a better steel. I would have liked to see... I mean, I don't know what you could do to try to protect this lock. Maybe don't have a cutout right here, making it super easy to access. Make it just so you have to push it down instead of, like, there's no need to have any jimping here because all you're doing is pushing it down. I don't know. Something like that. I like this thing. I struggled to see the exact usage. I mean, this version right here screams gent cool carry, but then there's no way of deploying it stealthily, even if you, like, barely, like, are. If you even try to not launch it, it's just not going to open. The detent is strangely very strong, but also very light. Like, it's not actually a very strong detent, but the leverage that you have is also not very good. I'm a little bit disappointed. Like, I want to love this thing. I want to love it. But I just can't recommend it unless you just need this thing. For $180, I can see it. I can see it a little bit more. The $240 version, I really can't see. The $200 version, just get the 180. This Damascus is pretty. It's pretty. It's not bad. But I think there's a lot of pretty interesting versions as well on this thing. Right now, Blade HQ only has one. They have the Tanto, which this is the drop point. They obviously, since I mentioned it, they have a Tanto. And has partial serrations for some reason. I don't think this needs partial serrations. They have a lot of weird versions of this thing, honestly. They have the Tanto. They have a lot of versions with partial serrations. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if you did enough digging and you found a full serrated version. Yeah, I want to try to keep an eye out for more Mantis knives because I don't hate this. I don't hate their OEM work. I just don't like... I think the design is a little bit flawed, and some of the choices and materials are interesting. I don't like the 440C for the price tag, and I really don't like this checkerboard. I don't want to be able to play checkers on my knife. But yeah, if you own the Gearhead, please comment down below what you think about it. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.